year or two. And so he is on an amazing run in this tournament so far as well. We'll have to see if he can take home another win and defeat yet another world champion on his way.
Well, let's go ahead and also talk about the matchup at hand. And Santi versus Paul is obviously very, very interesting. I think that Serena on Santi's team is going to be yet another MVP, just taking a look at the fact that you've got the Incineroar and the Rillaboom that can use priority attacks on Paul's team. And also, speed control is going to be very important here, Aaron.
Absolutely, yeah. So Paul Ruiz, of course, running that Xerneas team. So much of this team is designed to enable the Xerneas, let that Geomancy get set up, and then go from there. Santi, meanwhile, running a really fast-paced offensive team with that Choice Scarf Kyogre that we've seen. And I really feel like the Choice Scarf has been the MVP item on this Kyogre. It allows the Kyogre to basically outspeed restricted Pokemon that it otherwise wouldn't outspeed, like Xerneas, like Calyrex Shadow Rider. And just like you said, Rosemary, that Serena's going to be a really big deal here. Typically, one of the best ways to deal with Kyogre is Rillaboom, but Paul has to be a lot more aware of clicking that Grassy Glide because Serena can just switch in at any given point and deny that Grassy Glide. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup because Santi's Kyogre will be able to outspeed that Xerneas before it gets a Geomancy off. If Xerneas eats something like a Water Spout immediately, it might just be in KO range from a Grassy Glide from that Rillaboom, for example, on Santi's end. So Paul really has to maneuver this early game well and try to make sure Xerneas does not get heavily damaged, maybe damage the Kyogre, chip away a little bit so that Water Spout doesn't do as much damage. But for Paul, it's basically all about positioning and setting up to get that Geomancy off. And I think Amoonguss is actually going to be the most important Pokemon for him here, whether it be getting a single Spore off, that's going to slow down Santi a lot, or potentially doing damage to the Kyogre with a Grass type attack.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you about the Amoonguss being such an necessary pick here, but I am so excited to just see how this match plays out, Aaron, especially when you take a look at how phenomenal both of these players are and just the fact that they have these two incredibly different teams with great supportive Pokemon for both of their restricteds. Let's go ahead and just jump right into the winners finals. This is definitely a match that you don't want to miss.
Here we go. It's going to be the Serena and the Kyogre lead. You know, we were just talking about both of these two Pokemon. Santi just starts off the game with it immediately, and the Amoonguss and the Xerneas. So, you know, I think this makes a lot of sense, right? From Paul's perspective, it's really hard to lead a fake out user, right? The Incineroar just gets dunked on by the Kyogre immediately, and the Rillaboom, of course, is going to struggle against the Serena switch-in. So the thing here is, you know, you have the potential to maybe protect the Xerneas and then with the Amoonguss go for something like a Spore or that Grass Knot onto the Kyogre immediately. But we've seen Santi's team throughout this tournament as well, and we actually know that the Serena has Taunt. That's actually a pretty big surprise because so many Serenas run Assault Vest typically. So Santi actually has the very safe play here, given that he has the Taunt, to just taunt the Amoonguss and Water Spout turn one.
Yeah, well, the Intimidate is at least going to come out here, and because Serena is a physical attacker, that is going to help at least limit the amount of output damage that Serena can do. But that Kyogre with that Choice Scarf is going to move first, and Incineroar just switching in to be knocked out here, and that Amoonguss, taking a critical hit. Oh man, that's a lot of damage onto that Amoonguss as well. Plus the taunt coming out from this arena here. Oh boy, I don't think this Amoonguss, especially going for the Spore here, that's not going to be good for Paul in this game number one.
Yeah, that basically feels like the worst possible start for Paul, right? And because this is a closed team sheet tournament, it's very difficult to expect taunt coming out from Serena. And so if Serena doesn't have taunt in that position, turn one plays out completely differently, right? It's like you put the Kyogre to sleep, you bring out Xerneas, and you can just set up with the Xerneas. So it's really that one single move choice in Serena that completely changes the dynamic of this matchup. And Paul, unfortunately, does get hit by that taunt. The Amoonguss now really can't do very much other than go for Grass Knot or switch out. And so it's in a really awkward position, right? Santi basically didn't lose anything on turn one. Paul gets a little bit of information. Now the Xerneas is back out. But if you're Santi, right, you can just click Water Spout once again. You know the Amoonguss is taunted now. Serena has Triple Axle, so you can just go for that Water Spout and Triple Axle onto the Amoonguss slot. And with Incineroar switching in earlier, you either basically sacrifice the Amoonguss or switch in Rillaboom and give it up. And looks like Paul wants to conserve that Rillaboom and just give up Amoonguss, which makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, especially if you can try to get rid of the Serena at some point, but that Kyogre is locked into the Water Spout now thanks to that Choice Scarf, and we'll see whether or not that Amoonguss is going to be able to survive. It hangs on with 1 HP here. And now, but the Serena going for the Triple Axle, that is going to be enough to clean up that Amoonguss. And Yeah, even though we did see that Intimidate drop, it was only at 1 HP. So now you do get a chance to bring in that Rillaboom. But we know, Aaron, that Rillaboom only has access to Grassy Glide as a grass type attack. So no, without the availability of something like a Wood Hammer, you can't go for the priority move here.
So true, and Rillaboom is just having the toughest time right now, right? You can't go for Fake Out or Grassy Glide. Those are really two of the best moves that you can typically go for with Rillaboom. So Paul's obviously in a huge deficit right now, but he can still come back. You just have to get the Geomancy off with Xerneas, but looks like Paul's actually opting for that double protect with Xerneas, and does get it. That keeps him in the game.
Yeah, that is definitely going to keep Paul in the game here, especially because Zarina was going for that Grassy Glide, being able to use priority attacks by itself. But we also see that it's just going to be Water Spout once again. Rillaboom should be able to take that pretty nicely here. And because of the knockoff, though, this is where I think things get a little bit interesting. You do get a decent amount of damage into the Kyogre, but you knock off the Choice Scarf. And so I feel like that opens up Santi's options to actually go for something else that could be really beneficial here.
Super true, and that is such a good point because while the Xerneas now can get the Geomancy off, first of all, Paul making the perfect play, right? If you don't go for the double protect there, your Xerneas is just gonna faint, right, to the Grassy Glide. But even if it doesn't faint, it hangs on with a little bit of HP, Santi still has priority potentially in the back as well. So this is the exact setup he needed to at least get that Geomancy off. But like you pointed out, Rosemary, that Kyogre now is no longer locked into that Water Spout. So you can potentially just double up onto Rillaboom with something like an Ice Beam and a U-turn or triple axle from the Serena and basically force this to be a 4v1 kind of situation. What's also really difficult for Paul is that he's running a special Xerneas set with that substitute rather than Dazzling Gleam, making this endgame a lot more difficult for him because without Dazzling Gleam, you can only knock out one Pokemon at a time.
Absolutely. Dazzling Gleam, just being a spread attack, is just going to be so good at being able to deal damage to both Pokemon. But, oh gosh, the U-turn coming out as well from this arena, just trying to allow Santi to pivot here, but also secure the knockout onto Rillaboom. I think this just, after game number 1, Paul needs to really rethink a little bit more about how to enter into game number 2, what kind of adjustments that he can make, and especially knowing that Serena has Taunt, I feel like that actually does affect how Paul can kind of go into this game number 2.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, once again, like, I think we've talked about this a lot throughout the course of the tournament, but even having one surprise move or item is such a big deal. And we've seen every player bring that to the table, right? So Santi having that Choice Scarf on Kyogre, it's not really that surprising of an item, but, you know, a lot of players often opt for something like water type attacking boosting item, right? And so Santi does reveal all 4 of his Pokemon, but these are really the best 4 Pokemon to have in this position, especially because that Urshifu is Focus Sashed. I love Santi's play here where you basically get the free switching into Urshifu, right? So it's now like, okay, you have the Surging Strikes, which is super safe, and you know, the thing is that Santi right now doesn't know that Paul doesn't have Dazzling Gleam, right? So he's just still playing as optimally as possible, and with Rillaboom and Serena, like, both of those Pokemon are so good in this matchup because they both get access to Grassy Glide, right? And so it's like, sure, Xerneas can set up, but when you have all the priority, you have Grassy Glide from Rillaboom, Grassy Glide from Serena, Urshifu with the Focus Sash allows it to get a single Surging Strikes off, and then even potential priority from Aqua Jet, that's even better.
Yeah, well, here we are going to see the priority come out here from that Rillaboom in terms of that Grassy Glide. Xerneas able to fire back, though, with a Moonblast, and wow, it's so bulky, Aaron. That Rillaboom going to be able to hang on here, and we are going to see the Surging Strikes come out from Santi's Urshifu, obviously going to be dealing a critical hit with each attack. It looks like Xerneas will be able to hang on in this position, but is it going to be enough knowing that Rillaboom can just go for another priority Grassy Glide here?
Yeah, that was actually a lot of information, right? Now we know Santi's Rillaboom has that Assault Vest, and so not super surprised to see it hang on, but that actually makes this matchup even more difficult for Paul, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, now you know, even if your Xerneas gets set up, you actually need a chip at the Rillaboom to guarantee a KO afterwards, because Rillaboom itself is so good into Xerneas, right? It's got that priority Grassy Glide. That alone did around 40% of damage into Xerneas. So I feel like that was basically a perfectly played game on Santi's end, and from Paul's end, he did everything in his power that he could have, but it was just that turn 1 where he lost way too much momentum. It was really that taunt just completely turning the tides into Santi's favor. And so I think it basically, you have to reevaluate. Now you know that taunt is coming out on turn 1. You have to cover for that option because Amoonguss got nothing off in that first turn, right? So it's like Amoonguss can have the opportunity to go for Grass Knot onto the Kyogre, for example. Even if you chip away at it for like 20-30% of damage, that drastically decreases Water Spout's damage output, and then Xerneas can potentially get the opportunity to Geomancy. But Paul basically needs a better turn 1 because it was going to be nearly impossible to win that game. Like, he played perfectly after turn 1, but it just didn't matter because Santi had built up such a big lead.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, turn 1 and turn 2 seems so crucial in these Series 10 matches that if you get the leads wrong or you get turn number 1 wrong, it really feels like there can be a pretty heavy snowball effect that can happen. And that's definitely something that I feel like Santi was really developing very, very well over the course of that game number 1. But going into game number 2, I am very interested to see whether or not Grass Knot ends up coming out from that Amoonguss. I think Grass Knot's just a really interesting move, right? It does damage based on the calculation of how much weight the other target has. So it is kind of interesting to know that, like, yeah, Kyogre is a pretty big Pokemon. So I would imagine that Grass Knot is going to do quite a bit of damage to it. And as you mentioned, it will reduce the output of those water spouts immensely when you're able to chip away at that HP pool. But let's go ahead and just get into this game number 2 and see what happens here. I think Paul can make some really great adjustments, knowing that the Zarina does actually have Taunt. And the fact that Santi is going to be leading the exact same 2 Pokemon as game number 1, I really like the adjustment here coming out from Paul to bring out the Incineroar right away, and also the Amoonguss, knowing the Amoonguss should be able to survive a water spout, especially if it's not going to be a critical hit.
Exactly, and the Intimidate here also playing a big role, right? So that way you reduce Serena's damage output, making sure that Amoonguss can survive a potential Water Spout and a Triple Axle. I really like what Paul's going for here. As you can see, he's indicating the Rillaboom switch in. That's so smart. You bait the Water Spout on turn 1, you conserve the Incineroar, which is so important in dealing with Serena, dealing with Rillaboom. Part of the issue for Paul in that last game was he lost Incineroar so early on, you don't get further Intimidates off. And so I think this is actually the perfect turn 1 play from Paul, and it's really the best thing that he can do in what is not exactly the easiest matchup because of that taunt.
Oh, and something else that I really like about this as well is that the Kyogre, yes, baiting out that water spout here means it is going to be locked into it this time around. And Paul is not going to fall for the same trick twice. Just going to go ahead and go for the Grass Knot here. We'll see exactly how much it does. And take a look at that damage. Kyogre is a heavy Pokemon, Aaron.
I think that was a brilliant adjustment on Paul's end, right? Like, he leads the Incineroar to get that Intimidate, so ensures that your Amoonguss can survive, and then you bait the Water Spout, you get the Rillaboom in, and, Paul didn't really end up taking too much damage, and the beautiful thing about Amoonguss is, you can do damage to it, but it can actually heal back so much with Regenerator, and so Paul in a substantially better position this time around, where Kyogre's biggest offensive asset in Water Spout, like you mentioned, is drastically reduced. You also have that Intimidate on Serena, so suddenly its damage output isn't that great either, and so Paul definitely has a lot more options on the board this time around, and Santi's Kyogre is not nearly as much of a threat. Didn't get that one really big water spout that it typically looks for in a match.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel like Santi is definitely considering when switching out that Kyogre, is the fact that with that Choice Scarf, you were locked into Water Spout, and at that HP, you were definitely not going to be doing a whole lot of damage here. But I love the switch in, the free switch in that Paul has been able to identify as something that he can bring in here into 2 physical attackers on Santi's side of the field. Not to mention, also going to pivot again with that U-turn coming out from the Rillaboom, allowing that Amoonguss to come back in, and look how much HP it's already been able to regain from that Regenerator ability.
This is a completely different match from that last one, even though we're seeing all of the same Pokemon, right? So it goes to show how much of an impact that first turn can have in the lead matchup specifically. I think it can be really difficult to find, that specific play that Paul was able to identify, but he was able to identify it. And so the game's not over, obviously, but right now it's going to be really difficult for Santi to actually deal with the Amoonguss. And part of it is now the Amoonguss is safely out on the field. You haven't been able to taunt it, so the Amoonguss is actually free to Spore, right? And if you look at Paul's HP on all of his Pokemon, because of that Regenerator, because of the grassy terrain, he's barely taken any damage at this point in the match. And so, we were talking about before going into this match that even a single Spore drastically slows down Santi.
Yep.
You can shut down one Pokemon. That makes it so much easier for Xerneas to actually get that Geomancy off.
Yeah, and I really like that the target for this particular attack is going to be that Urshifu, especially because Urshifu does threaten quite a bit of damage in the rain with those surging strikes, and also just that priority Aqua Jet that could potentially come out here. And I love that the Zarina wasn't on the field for when we actually saw that fake out come out from the Incineroar here. So we will be able to get this Spore off, and Urshifu just going to be taking a little bit of a nap on the field.
Yeah, and Paul in the position right now where, because he built this early lead, just by damaging Kyogre. I think, you know, he was probably fine with even Serena switching into either slot there, just because it's like, okay, if you switch in Serena, well, it's not going to really do too much. And like, yeah, maybe Urshifu gets the Surging Strikes off into Incineroar. But if Paul puts a single Pokemon to sleep, which he just accomplished, he's still in a fantastic position. And that's exactly what he ends up getting off. The turn actually plays out even better than he probably would have expected to.
Oh, wow. Triple Axel here going to be coming out from this arena. It is going to hit all 3 times. So that is going to do a significant chunk to that Amoonguss. But I really like the parting shot here onto this arena. Maybe the Triple Axel doesn't hit all 3 times next time. You're also dropping the attack stat of that Serena, who is a physical attacker. And you get to pivot once again into your Rillaboom that should be able to do a lot of damage in this particular case, especially if you can just continue to pivot around with those U-turns as well. Oh, wow. I guess Urshifu is really heavy too, especially with the super effective attack.
So cool. Yeah, exactly. The synergy here between Rillaboom and the Rillaboom and the Amoonguss is great, right? Because it's like Grass Knot already does good damage into Kyogre and Urshifu, and then the Rillaboom is setting up the grassy terrain for it as well.
Yeah.
So it's not every day you see Amoonguss being used as an offensive tool, but it's actually so good in this matchup. So brilliant on Paul to identify that, and he is just in such a phenomenal shape right now. He hasn't even set up that Geomancy, but doesn't necessarily need to, right? This next turn is so safe. You can U-turn, switch the Amoonguss out into the Incineroar, get another Intimidate off. And what makes this so tricky is if you don't actually get the KO on Paul's Pokemon, he has so much healing just from the Regenerator. Switching out with U-turn, and that Amoonguss, as we've seen, has Pollen Puff. That's actually a really critical move on Amoonguss's moveset as well. So this is just a completely different match, and I feel like Santi hasn't really played poorly. It's just that first turn really didn't go in his favor. He lost so much momentum. He did have the opportunity that one turn with Urshifu to maybe switch out and eat up the Spore, but even then, it's just like as soon as Kyogre takes as much damage as it does turn 1, suddenly your damage output is so lacking because this Incineroar continues to come out and cycle in the Intimidates. And once again, Paul's basically taken no damage on his Pokemon thanks to that Regenerator and the grassy terrain healing up.
Look at that. That's definitely so much synergy on this team. And you kind of have to wonder, like, oh, you've got Rillaboom and you have Amoonguss. That leaves you a little bit vulnerable in terms of the fact that they both share that grass typing. But at the same time, it's just like Amoonguss, especially with that Pollen Puff. We saw how that functioned yesterday in order to keep that Xerneas safe and healthy after it got that Geomancy boost. But look at, oh no, just missing that first attack. It's only 90% accurate. So that Serena is not going to be able to get off that Triple Axel. And if you don't get that first hit off, you're not able to go through the other hits either. So, oh my gosh, that is absolutely huge.
Yeah, likely I don't think it would have KO'd even with all the hits, thanks to Serena's attack being reduced a little bit here.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's obviously not what you want to see if you're Santi, right? At this point, you're already behind the game, and let's say you get a critical hit or two, well, then you eliminate Amoonguss, and that's really been kind of the biggest nuisance on the board thus far. And so, yeah, the strong thing here is that Amoonguss just doesn't even need to rely on the Spore because that Grass Knot just does so much damage, right? It's probably not going to knock out Kyogre now without grassy terrain, but of course, Paul can contemplate switching out the Incineroar back out into the Rillaboom. You can even switch Amoonguss out here if you want to conserve its health, just because Amoonguss is so good offensively into all 4 of the Pokemon Santi brought. Notably, Santi did not bring the Tornadus or the Weavile. Those are the 2 things that actually threatened Amoonguss for the most amount of damage. And so as a result, just from that turn 1, suddenly it's like, okay, well, even if you deal 50% of damage to Amoonguss, it can just switch back out. It doesn't really care about that, right? And so Paul looks like he is contemplating going for the Grass Knot here, but the one thing you might want to watch out for here is getting crit on the Amoonguss. So you could make the argument to switch out here, but looks like Paul is willing to just attack, and I think that's also totally fine in this spot.
Yeah, what I think is really unfortunate about Santi's position here is that you didn't get a chance to reset up the rain, but it's not necessary because you're going to lock yourself into the Ice Beam. And oh no, even with the limited damage output on this arena, that is going to be enough to knock out that Amoonguss after that Ice Beam came out from the Kyogre as well as that Triple Axel. But this Incineroar should be able to fire back here with that Flare Blitz, knocking out the Serena, and that puts Paul into a much better position, especially when you consider how that Rillaboom is going to be able to come out on the field now and be able to use that Grassy Glide. So I call that a pretty big win. Or you could just go ahead and bring out the Xerneas here, knowing that Kyogre is locked into Ice Beam this time around.
I think, in that position, I really like Paul's play because what he's saying is basically, okay, you're probably not going to knock out both of my Pokemon, especially without the rain, like you called out, Rosemary. Even if Kyogre goes for like an Origin Pulse, Incineroars are so bulky that there's actually a pretty good chance they can survive, right? And so Paul in this position is just covering for everything and saying, okay, I'm going to either chip away more at your Kyogre or get the knockout onto Serena. Works out even better because now with the KO onto Serena, you no longer have that priority protection, right? And like you called out, the Kyogre is locked into Ice Beam. That is not what you really want in this endgame because that means the Incineroar actually walls Kyogre, right? So right now Incineroar is in a position where it can just swap out, back in, go for further Intimidates. And Santi here just opting for the Grassy Glide on an Ice Beam, needs a freeze to even potentially have a chance here. And Xerneas does not get frozen here. So I think that really should put Paul in a winning position to take home this game.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to see that Moonblast as well as that Flare Blitz just double up into that Rillaboom there. And I feel like the other thing about this particular game is that Paul doesn't necessarily need to get up the Geomancy on the Xerneas because you still have the ability of the Rillaboom in the back to just clean up this Kyogre once it comes in with that priority Grassy Glide.
Precisely. One thing to note in this matchup is that Santi doesn't really have Fairy Resists, and so Xerneas actually does really good damage even without that Geomancy boost, and you have to be extra careful about clicking Geomancy with Xerneas in this specific matchup because Santi has so much priority, right? Typically, the upside of Geomancy is like, okay, even if I take half my health, well, I'm just going to outspeed and KO everything. But you're not going to outspeed in this matchup because you're up against a Rillaboom, you're up against a Serena, even Urshifu with priority Aqua Jet is an issue as well. And so I think the main star of that last game was absolutely the Amoonguss from that turn one. That turn one was just absolutely brilliant, and I gave Paul so much momentum. As soon as Kyogre can't click Water Spout, I mean, it can, it's just damage output is just going to be drastically reduced. It's in a really tough position. So I think for Santi going into this third game, you kind of have to adjust to cover for the Amoonguss, potentially coming in. And so now I'm looking at Weavile and Tornadus. I think Santi really struggled to actually get enough damage to KO that Amoonguss, so it kept switching out, Regenerate heals it. So something like Weavile plus Kyogre, I think, is a really strong lead, like allows you to have a faster fake out and also gives you access to that triple axle on the Weavile, which does so much damage. But I think Tornadus Kyogre is a potential lead as well. But Weavile, just with the fastest fake out user between these two players, I think is a really strong option to consider.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned the Tornadus because we actually haven't gotten a chance to see that in too many of Santi's battles, just because of the fact that with that Choice Scarf on the Kyogre, you're already going very, very fast, so you don't necessarily need the Tailwind setup in order to make sure that Kyogre is going to outspeed a lot of the opposing threats onto the other team. However, if you want to make sure that you're outspeeding that Xerneas, then Tornadus and Tailwind can actually really help you with a lot of your partner Pokemon in order to make sure that you can get the damage necessary onto that Xerneas specifically after it gets that +2 boost from the Geomancy. So I definitely think that Tornadus could be a really nice adjustment here. Not to mention that Tornadus just has a lot of other things that it has access to, like it has Icy Wind that it can potentially use here just to help slow things down a little bit, and maybe also hit that Amoonguss for some super effective damage. So I'm super excited to get into this next game and see exactly how this is going to go down. We are 1-1 between Paul Ruiz and Santi Tarquinio, and I can't wait to see how this one's going to end because this has already been a super exciting match with a lot of stakes actually coming in to this very first turn, Aaron.
Yeah, and it is actually going to be the Weavile adjustment. I think both Weavile and Tornadus were good options, and I really like the Weavile decision here, right? Because now you have a fake out user that's faster than the Incineroar. You also have a stronger triple axle into Amoonguss. Yes, you're intimidated, but still, this is a much better lead for Santi because now you actually put on a lot more offensive pressure into Amoonguss specifically, right? So Paul's in a really tricky spot where, he's, I think, contemplating the fake out, and I like that in this position because, like, maybe normally you'd be worried about the Serena switching, but because you have the Spore as well, it's like, okay, if you switch in Serena, well, Kyogre's not KOing the Amoonguss, so you get the Spore off in the Kyogre anyway. But Santi can just counter that with the fake out of his own onto Incineroar and then go for a Water Spout. So if both players trade fake out turn one, Amoonguss, yeah, that's an even better play. Yeah, you want to fake out Amoonguss because you don't want it to Spore ever. And so by trading fake outs here, now you're in such a good position, right? Like Paul has to switch out the Incineroar or sacrifice it here. Something is going to take a ton of damage, and something like Water Spout and triple axle into the Amoonguss, that might just be enough to pick up a KO onto it. And if it is, feels like the game is just so hard to come back from at that point.
Oh my gosh.
Paul really needs to get a Spore off this turn, basically.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think you're just banking on the idea that triple axel doesn't get all 3 hits. I think even 2 with the water spout could be enough to be able to knock out the Amoonguss. Just you know, I'm just kind of thinking about that because we are -1 on the Weavile, but oh gosh, it's all gonna come down to this. I gotta see what exactly happens here. Amoonguss is just gonna switch out. And so we're going to bring out a Rillaboom, but I kind of wondered whether or not Paul was going to go for a little bit of that bait and switch. Maybe just allowing that Amoonguss to come back in and go for that increased attack Grass Knot with the grassy terrain up right here. We will see the Water Spout come out from the Kyogre, which is going to be what it gets locked into. And yeah, Incineroar's just going to go down right to that.
Yeah, and the main question is, you know, you got the Intimidate onto Weavile, but Triple Axel is still a pretty strong attack. And
yeah,
Santi is running that wide lens as well, right? So it's a much higher probability of hitting. There's 2 hits already. 3rd one comes out, and that's a kill!
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. We did have the -1 in the attack, but then you also do have that wide lens, which is going to increase the accuracy of that 90% accurate Triple Axel. Holy cow, though. Rillaboom just going down to that. That is a really, really back against the wall scenario for Paul Ruiz right now, because you're relying now on the Amoonguss being able to get some significant damage into this Kyogre, and also this Xerneas being able to set up Geomancy here, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like Paul has to protect here and then just go for a Spore or a Grass Knot onto Kyogre. Hope that your Amoonguss can survive. But this is why Weavile is such a nice adjustment, right? Serena also has that Triple Axel, but it does substantially less damage. Weavile gets that same type attack bonus from Triple Axel. And so Paul is just in a really tough situation because this time around you haven't damaged the Kyogre or put it to sleep, meaning that it can get a really big water spout off, right? That's really all Santi needs. 1 huge water spout into Xerneas. That sets up the Rillaboom or the Serena in the back to click those grassy glides and just pick up the KO. So it looks like Paul is contemplating the Geomancy here. I think that makes sense. Oh, he's going all in on this play. Okay, he's going to go for Geomancy and Pollen Puff. So certainly can respect it. I think you really need to hope that Amoonguss can hang on here from the potential Triple Axel. We'll see who Santi targeted with Weavile.
Yeah, Weavile is going to go ahead and move first. It is going to be the Triple Axel onto the Amoonguss. Obviously, that first hit's not going to do very much here, but it's about whether or not the Amoonguss can hang on through this, and it does not. Oh, the critical hits. Oh, for that 3rd hit, especially doing more damage than the first 2, that is going to be enough to knock out this Amoonguss. So while Xerneas can go for the Geomancy here, there's no healing left on the board. So Pollen Puff not going to be able to help this Xerneas out, and we know that Paul Xerneas can only use single target attacks.
Yeah, I mean, that basically feels like game over, right? But I think Paul's play there made a lot of sense. I think there are 2 options to go for in his position. You either go all in on the Geomancy setup this turn, or you protect the Xerneas and try to put one of the opposing 2 Pokemon to sleep, right? Like putting the Kyogre to sleep. So I think both of those are viable. In the end, neither of them would actually work out because of that critical hit from Weavile. Is really close as to whether or not I actually would have picked up the KO. I feel like Amoonguss maybe would have hung on with just a sliver of HP. And so, yeah, I actually really like the Pollen Puff decision there, because if you survive, then suddenly you heal Xerneas all the way back up. The tricky thing here is, even if Amoonguss had survived, like, Santi still has 2 Pokemon in the back, right? And so it's like, where do you get enough damage, basically, especially because you have that single target Moonblast. So it feels like the game's end just kind of got accelerated a little bit quicker because of that critical hit. But really, Santi made the perfect adjustment with that Weavile lead. And it feels like so much of this set has really been decided on the first turn of the game.